Aloha, namaste. This is Radha, and I'm here to talk about our total solar eclipse on April 8th. It's in the star Revati, which is at the very end of Pisces. Revati is ruled by Pushan, who's the nurturer. He's the shepherd who takes care of the domestic animals. And as such, he's nurturing the wealth that the animals bring, right, in the agrarian world. This is the equivalent of bounty and wealth having a herd. um but he also evokes that very gentle quality of one who cares for animals and really has this energy of the shepherd who is walking the animals to safety, walking them home. And as such, this nakshatra can really help us on our journey home, on our path towards that final resting place. Whereas the previous two nakshatras of Pisces, Purva Bhadrapada and Uttara Bhadrapada, have a fiery quality to them. And there's a level of work that must occur, especially in Uttara Bhadrapada. In Revati, there's a resting and a surrendering that's occurring, where the final stretch is actually just letting go. Revati, the goddess, is the consort of Balaram, who is Krishna's brother. And in the story, her father, who was King Kakudmi, had a desire for his daughter to marry the most perfect of suitors. And so he went up to Brahma Loka, to the realm of Brahma, and asked him, which of this list of eligible suitors is the best fit for my daughter? But in the time that he had to wait for Brahma to see him, much time had passed on Earth. The Brahma Loka, the time passes very quickly, and in the amount of human time that had passed was substantial. And so when they came back to Earth, none of those suitors even existed anymore. Not even their children existed anymore. And so she had to find another suitor, and she found Balaram. But because she came from a different time period, she was also quite a bit larger than the people of her time. And so Balaram famously used his plow to shorten her. Revati also means the wealthy and has this quality of growing and abundance, and anything that we put our attention onto being able to expand and grow. Because this is in the sign of Pisces, we have to really look at what we consider wealth, right? Is it just the herd of animals that's going to bring us abundance of wealth from selling the milk or the butter? Is it just the wealth that comes from accrual of material possessions and making money in business? Or is this spiritual wealth? Because in Pisces, we're really seeking to, like I said before, make that final surrender into source, merge with oneness. All of the fighting, all of the striving, all of the things that we've been working so hard for coming to final completion. And so the abundance that we see is the most powerful here in Revati is that of spirit and that of the path of the spiritual aspirant. Because this is an eclipse and because the sun is involved, and the sun is power, authority, government, or people who hold positions of power, we can see that there's an eclipse of this kind of energy. And it might specifically have to do with spiritual leaders or people who are, holding people in a belief system of some sort or in some kind of religious manner. But it's an exaggeration of that, because this is the North Node. This is Rahu. This is where we have the big open mouth just devouring everything in sight. There's an exaggerated view wherever Rahu is, this othering and this desire to really make something bigger than it is. Or our desire itself makes things bigger than they are. And so we can see this maybe blowing up of the power that one might have, say somebody who has spiritual cities, where they, can do magnificent things, and we really believe, wow, this person is amazing and powerful. And it might be more of an illusion than we think. Or we can also see this quality of the sophomorish and immature nature of Rahu, where there's a lot of stops and starts and there's an obsessive seeking of power, and yet it constantly gets cut short and there needs to be a new attempt. And so this can be a time where those people who really do value power and value wealth in and of itself for egoic reasons really experience quite a downfall. Maybe first it feels like they're on top of the world and they have all the power in the world and they have all the followers, and then there can be something that stops that short or eclipses that power. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can look at where all the planets are, because they are certainly piled up here in this little quadrant from Aquarius to Aries. This is Aquarius, this is Pisces, and this is Aries. And you can see our new moon here is at the very end of Pisces with the North Node very close degrees, and Venus is involved. And as you might have seen from my previous video, Venus is exalted in Pisces. This is where we have a quality of love that is like that of the mystics. When we see this poetry of Rumi and of Hafiz and these dripping words of just complete ecstasy and love that people wish was written by their, by their lover to them, but is actually written to God. This is the kind of love we see when Venus is in Pisces, just an absolute surrender and devotion to spirit itself. We can find in our romantic relationships this fantasy, this idealization that feels like that level that we see in this poetry, that we see in the bhakti and the devotion of those who have been completely and totally enamored by God himself. But we can also see that there might be a humanness underneath that, which is disappointed, right? We can feel this is the highest love I've ever felt, and I don't need anything more than these beautiful tantric moments. But then when all the smoke and mirrors starts to disappear, we find that we're left feeling kind of empty or alone because the other needs of relationship aren't quite met in this alignment. So more than any of the other planets, Venus really struggles in her exaltation state to give us the thing that she wants to give us, which is relationships, right? She gives us the happiness, the high level of elation and happiness and love that we seek in Pisces, but the actual relational happiness and actual relationship can struggle in this sign. And if we look at the fact that Venus is exalted in a sign that's inimical, or in a planet sign that is inimical or unfriendly towards her, which is Jupiter, we can see how this comes into being. Venus is one sign, or one planet, excuse me, that is debilitated in her friendly place with Mercury's ruled sign of Virgo, and exalted in an unfriendly terrain of Jupiter's sign of Pisces. And this says a lot about our relationship to love itself, right? There's a practical, annoying, nitpicking quality to Virgo that makes love not romantic anymore. And that loses it for us, that kills it for us a little. And yet this romanticized fantasy of love compels us forward and makes us do crazy things. I mean, people have given up everything in their world for this feeling of love. And often it can, like I said, not necessarily bring us the results we're looking for in our regular everyday life. And so Venus, sometimes we feel more ease and grace when she's in her own signs of Libra and Taurus, or when she's in perhaps the other friendly signs of the air signs or the earth signs like Capricorn or Aquarius or Gemini, because it's a lot to hold this high level of love. It's hard to sustain. But in this particular eclipse, we can really see that it can exalt the experience, right? We can have such an incredible, profound experience of love and divinity and recognition of our own power as long as we're keeping it in the humble realm of our own power that we're recognizing for ourselves and not necessarily trying to accrue a mass of followers underneath us, we might have some pretty profound insights and experiences here that can stay with us, even when the smoke clears, even when all the illusions reveal themselves. We can still hold true to this thing that we've witnessed, just like if you've had a mystical experience before, or something that just felt completely out of the ordinary and took you into a totally other time and realm. And then you had to come back to reality, and it was can be kind of harsh, or difficult to integrate those two things. Well, yet that taste, that flavor can always stay with you. And it's the thing that keeps us moving forward on the path. We know something happens. We know something exists beyond what we've seen. And in this case, we might very well feel that taste of the highest love and the truest love. And so this can be a very profound moment for us. We do have in this eclipse also some other energies running. One of them is Mercury began his retrograde cycle on the 1st of April. And he had just stepped into Aries over the Gandanta point. And then he began retrograding on the 1st. So like a week later, and then now he's going back over the Gandanta, and it's happening literally like hours after the eclipse. The exact time of the moon and sun coming together is 8:20 a.m. here in Hawaii, and the time of like the maximum eclipse here as it will be visible is 11 a.m. Excuse me, 7:11 a.m. Hawaii time. But in other locations where it's fully visible along that eclipse path, I think like in Texas, it's going to be 1:24 in the afternoon, or at least in like San Antonio, Texas, it'll be, 1:24 in the afternoon will be the exact moment of the height of the eclipse. So it shifts based on where we're located. And you can look that up for your exact location, especially if you're in the path, you probably already have looked that up. But we see that right after the time of the eclipse and the moon and sun coming together, we have Mercury jumping back into Pisces. Actually, it's happening on the 9th now that I've done this now. This is the second time I've done that. This is very Mercury retrograde. It actually happens on the 9th, the next day. So what's running with this, here, let me get it to just where it's happening. Okay, there we go. What's happening with this, with Mercury running backwards here into the sun and into Rahu and Pisces and jumping back over the Gandanta point, is that we're having to revisit something that we have started. So we had to already jump forward. And the Gandanta, for those of you who don't know, is this karmic knot, this place where we feel pretty stuck. And we oftentimes kind of just leap over in this uncomfortable, haphazard manner and then arrive in the new place in Aries and are like, let's go, And in the form of Mercury, it will really depend on what it rules for you. But also, it's going to have to do with our communication, with our intellect, with our discernment, with ideas we might have. And we set off running in a direction in Ashwini, where we have these two horses that are often not going in the same direction. And so this retrograde cycle is asking us to rein those horses in, see where the opposing energies are and try to recollect that energy, and maybe even have to go back to not just the beginning, because Ashwini is the beginning, but before the beginning, right? The time before it actually began, which is often in our subconscious. It's often something that has laid a foundation that we're not even fully present with or aware of. And so this can be a deep evaluation into our psyche and into our process of thinking itself and our process of discernment, how we know what's true and not true. And it can be some deep psychic work, if we're willing to do that and we're willing to go there. Hypnotism, dream work, all of these kind of 12th house things that can be very valuable when we're running any kind of cycle of 12th house. is also going to be really helpful here because Pisces is the natural 12th house. All kinds of psychic work right now or healing work is going to be very profound. But of course, you need to be careful about who you're allowing to preside over your subconscious, right? You don't want to just get any person to be doing this kind of work for you. And you want to be really careful even when you work with yourself, because not everything you see is exactly as it seems. We have a tendency to see things as we think they are, not necessarily as they are. And so the work can be deep and things can come up that we don't necessarily want to face. So that's something to look at as well. In addition to Mercury's retrograde experience, making this perhaps a little bit more confusing and definitely more relationally challenging, we also have Saturn and Mars moving ever closer together. And this is the 9th, right, when Mercury's already back into retrograde. But even on the day of this eclipse, we have them really just less than 2 degrees apart. And so we need to, and here, let me get that back to the time of the new moon. We need to be aware that right now we have some pretty intense conjunctions going on. Saturn has been here in Aquarius for a long time, right? And it's his own sign. There's commitment to the greater good, to our vision for society. We can see what hasn't been working. We want to work humbly in the direction of what would work for more people. Mars has just entered the picture in the past few weeks, and Mars is a little impatient. And in the sign of Aquarius, we see a lot around social justice and anger around things that are not right in the world. This is going to be particularly true because he's in Satabishak. He's in this star where we can see the corruption. We can see what's not right. We can see what's going wrong. Saturn has just inched into Purva Bhadrapada and has entered into that realm of awakening and releasing itself of, all the constraints of our material reality, but still has that hardworking ethic and commitment to doing what needs to be done. These two planets really have trouble together. Saturn is frozen and cold and fearful and takes time to act. Mars is quick and fiery and just let's blow things up and find out what happens later. And so the explosive quality that can come from this fire and ice is profound. And we've seen this conjunction in many times over the years. And there's almost always some kind of very intense explosive energy that occurs around this. So we want to be aware that the social world, the world of the little people, is also starting to really heat up. And whatever we've been sitting on and committed to quietly in the background is about to get angry and throw some fire onto that ice. And in conjunction with this eclipse of power and authority and those who are holding power and authority, this can be a very interesting moment for us. So we are here in this together, and there's a lot of things going on in the world right now that this can pertain to. There's a lot of leaders whose power is, perhaps needing to be usurped, and maybe not even just individual leaders, but whole coalitions or groups of people that have been in a place of authority and power. And then there's that individual power that I was talking about, where each of us learn how to harness our own inner power and strength. And this is where the real magic happens, because rather than there just being one entity or one person who proclaims to have power and know what's good for everyone else because they've had some profound experience, we start to have our own profound experiences with our power. And we no longer need to subject ourselves to some greater person's perceived idea of what the path looks like. Because just because something worked for someone else doesn't mean it's going to work for us, first of all. And second of all, we've all seen that power just does unfortunately change people. That even if they began with a really pure intention and had a really profound experience, as soon as they start accruing more and more followers and wealth comes away and all this kind of stuff, we start to see this corruption occur. And it's almost inevitable and unavoidable. And so the only answer is for individual people to become more empowered within themselves so that we don't feel the need to follow others so much in that way. And so we have this chance to really turn the tides in this moment. And it's powerful and it's potent, and it's also can be a little scary. And when we look at the actual eclipse itself and how many people are traveling, particularly in North America, right? Because this is where you can see the path of the eclipse from Texas to Maine. There's like a narrow pathway of this eclipse, and something like 4 million people are traveling to see this. So if you're already in those locations, sit tight and expect a lot of people coming your way. But in general, during eclipses, we don't really recommend travel, taking care of mundane activities. Really being outside and bathing in the energy of an eclipsed sun is not necessarily considered to be ideal for your spiritual well-being. So there's a lot to kind of just be aware of. It's also happening on a Monday. A lot of people will have to go to work. A lot of people will be in the middle of work or in traffic getting to work. And so recognizing what your limitations are around your situation, what you have to do, maybe what you want to do, if you want to go to the festival in Texas, then go, and have fun. And I definitely don't believe in passing fear around about the decisions people are making, but just, take it easy, be careful in those moments. Notice that no matter how calm and centered you are as a being and how much you're an open vessel to receive profound spiritual messages, there's going to be at least 20 to 30 people around you that are not, right? And they might really not be able to handle the energies coming at them. And that's why we don't really recommend being around a lot of people, because energy will be running all over the place. And so take the time to, center, ground, find a little space for yourself if you can, and relax into the experience, because this is a very, a very much an experience around surrender, letting go. And lastly, I'll just mention that this is the kickoff for our Chaitra Navaratri, the 9 nights of the goddess mother that happens in the springtime. And millions of people will be praying to bring her here in healing, in hope, and in love. And so if there is intentions and things you've been praying upon for yourself or for the world, this is a beautiful time to set forth those prayers and those intentions, to plant seeds of things that you want to nurture and grow in this time. This is the spring Navaratri, so it really has a lot to do with the planting. The fall Navaratri, which is probably more widely known and maybe more people are actually celebrating, has a lot to do with the harvest, right? But this is a time where we can plant seeds of what we want to bring forth in our life, and not just in our own personal life, right? Because this Aquarius energy is reminding us we need to care about everyone else as well. If it's happening over there, it's happening here. And the more we other each other, the more we're othering ourselves, really. And the less we're able to truly understand and drop into love. So blessings on your total solar eclipse. And I wish you a blessed Navaratri if you're celebrating, and I'll see you soon. Namaste.